Somewhere in a living room, right now, a dog is watching its owner hug another dog. And something happens. The tail stops moving. The ears flatten. The body pushes, slowly, deliberately, between the two of them. To most people, this looks like nothing, a quirky habit. But what if it isn't nothing at all? What if, hidden inside this ordinary moment, there's a question that scientists have only recently dared to ask seriously, a question that, for over a century, was considered far too human to even apply to an animal? The question is this: can a dog feel jealousy? Not annoyance, not excitement, not simple attention-seeking. Jealousy, the ache of being replaced, the fear of losing something that matters. For decades, most researchers would have dismissed the idea outright. Jealousy was thought to require something dogs supposedly didn't have, a concept of self, a sense of my relationship, my place, my person. But something strange started showing up in laboratories, and once scientists saw it, they couldn't unsee it. Before we go further, we need to understand where this story begins, not in a lab, but tens of thousands of years ago, in the flickering light of early human campfires. Dogs descend from wolves. That much is settled science. But the wolves that became dogs weren't just tamed. They were transformed, genetically reshaped by a process scientists call domestication syndrome, which altered not only their bodies, but the chemistry of their social minds. Wolves live in tightly bonded family units, where rank, access to resources, and social closeness are constantly negotiated. Losing status in a wolf pack isn't trivial. It can mean losing food, safety, even survival. Dogs inherited that same underlying architecture. Except now, the pack is often a single human being, and the resource that matters most isn't food, it's attention. If that instinct for social monitoring never disappeared, only found a new target, then a strange and slightly unsettling possibility opens up. Maybe dogs didn't lose the wiring for jealousy when they left the wild. Maybe they just pointed it at us. In 2014, psychologist Christine Harris at the University of California, San Diego, decided to test something that sounded almost absurd. Could dogs show jealous behavior toward an object that wasn't even alive? She and her colleague Carolyn Pruvost brought dogs into their homes and asked owners to ignore their pet while paying affectionate attention to something else, sometimes a jack-o'-lantern bucket, sometimes a children's book, and sometimes a realistic stuffed dog that whined and wagged its tail. The results were striking. When owners cuddled and spoke sweetly to the stuffed dog, many real dogs pushed between the owner and the toy, tried to get physically closer, and in some cases snapped or nudged the toy away, far more than when the owner showed the same affection to a mere object like a book. The dogs weren't reporting an inner feeling to the scientists. What the study captured was behavior consistent with jealousy, protective, attention-seeking, sometimes mildly aggressive responses to a rival for affection. Whether that behavior is accompanied by a genuine subjective emotion, an inner ache, a felt sense of threat, is something science still cannot fully answer. And that unresolved gap is exactly where the mystery deepens. Here's where it gets stranger. Human jealousy, according to most psychologists, requires something called a theory of mind, the ability to understand that another person has their own thoughts, feelings, and relationships, and to imagine how those might threaten your own bond with someone. For a long time, that kind of complex social reasoning was assumed to belong only to primates and perhaps a handful of other highly social species. Dogs were not supposed to qualify. And yet, in the same study, dogs directed almost all of their jealous-looking behavior at the fake rival specifically when it seemed to be receiving affection from their owner, not when it simply sat nearby, ignored. The behavior appeared socially targeted. Some researchers argue this suggests a simpler, more primitive form of jealousy, one that doesn't require imagining another mind at all, just a basic drive to protect access to a valued resource, in this case, an attachment figure. Others argue that even this primitive version still requires the dog to track who is bonding with whom,
a surprisingly sophisticated form of social awareness. So, which is it? Instinct without insight, or something closer to genuine social cognition? Right now, no one can say for certain. And maybe that's the point where the mystery becomes personal. Because if you own a dog, you've probably seen this moment already. The dog that inserts itself between you and a new partner, the dog that suddenly needs to be petted the instant you pick up a phone call, the dog that watches, unmoving, as you hold someone else's baby. Maybe you laughed it off, but maybe there was something else happening beneath that behavior, something we're only beginning to have the scientific language to describe.
If this kind of hidden emotional world inside dogs fascinates you as much as it fascinates us, this is only the beginning. There are far stranger discoveries waiting inside the canine mind. How dogs perceive time, how they dream, how they seem to grieve. Subscribing means you won't miss where this investigation goes next. To understand what jealousy might actually feel like for a dog, scientists turn to something more physical than behavior: hormones. Attachment between dogs and humans is tied to oxytocin, the same neurochemical involved in the bond between human parents and infants. Studies have shown that mutual gazing between dogs and their owners raises oxytocin levels in both, a finding so unusual that some researchers have called it evidence of a bond that mimics the parent-child relationship rather than anything seen between dogs and other species. If that bond is real, chemically, physiologically real, then a disruption to it, such as an owner's attention shifting elsewhere, isn't a trivial event for a dog. It may register as a genuine threat to something the dog's brain treats as essential. This doesn't prove dogs feel jealousy the way we do. Human jealousy carries layers of narrative, insecurity, comparison, imagined futures that require complex language-based thought. Dogs almost certainly don't experience those layers. But it does suggest something quieter, and in some ways more haunting: a raw, physiological alarm. Not the story of jealousy, perhaps just the feeling underneath it, stripped of words, but not necessarily stripped of experience. And here is where the deepest...
Neuroscientist Gregory Burns at Emory University trained dogs to lie still inside an MRI scanner, fully awake, unrestrained, so their brains could be observed responding to real emotional situations. His team found that certain reward-related brain regions in dogs activate in ways strikingly similar to humans when anticipating something valued, including social attention from their owner. Burns has argued cautiously that this kind of neural evidence makes it increasingly difficult to dismiss the idea that dogs have rich inner emotional lives. But even he is careful to draw a line. Similar brain activity doesn't guarantee an identical subjective experience. We still cannot climb inside a dog's mind and know with certainty what it is like to be that animal in the moment its owner turns away to greet someone else. That barrier, the one separating observable behavior and brain activity from actual subjective feeling, may be the single hardest wall in all of animal cognition science. We may never fully break through it. So, can dogs feel jealousy? The honest answer, the one real science currently allows, is this: dogs reliably display behaviors that closely resemble jealousy, triggered specifically by perceived threats to their bond with us, supported by attachment chemistry and reward-related brain activity that echo our own. Whether there is a felt subjective ache behind those behaviors, something dogs privately experience the way we do, remains one of the genuine open mysteries of animal minds. Personally, I find it remarkable that an animal shaped by us, living beside us for thousands of years, can still hold a mystery this deep. Perhaps the most extraordinary discovery here isn't a definitive answer.
It's realizing how much emotional complexity might be quietly unfolding behind eyes we've looked into 1,000 times and never fully understood. Because if dogs can feel something as intricate as jealousy, what else have we been missing? And that question, what else is hiding inside the canine mind, is exactly where our next investigation begins.